At first glance, the key and the lock it fits may seem very different. Different in shape, different in function, different in design. The man who looks at them without knowledge of their true nature might think them opposites, for one is meant to open and the other to keep closed. Yet, upon closer examination, he might see that without one, the other becomes useless. The wise man then sees that both lock and key are created for the same purpose. Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm JJ the Bearded Bookworm, and today we are going to be talking about Well of Ascension, the second book in the Mistborn Trilogy, and that opening was my favorite quote from this book. You see it all over the place. That's very common for a lot of people's favorite quotes through all of the Cosmere, but really shows how two opposite people, two very different people who love each other, can actually complement each other and together actually work together to fulfill an even greater purpose. Without further ado, let's get into it. I haven't done one of these in quite a long time. This review will be spoiler free. However, there will be spoilers for the previous book, The Final Empire. So if you have not read that book, this just might not be the review for you. I'm not making any promises. I'm going to try to keep those types of spoilers to a minimum-ish. But you have been warned. Spoilers are incoming in 3, 2, 1. Alright, so the Well of Ascension takes place a year after Vin kills the Lord Ruler. And now this giant power vacuum is created, and Elend does his best to kind of fulfill that role. He gets his dream. He is able to establish his ideal government. And nobles, merchants, and Scott are all relatively put to the same kind of power level. He creates a constitutional monarchy. He knows that the nobles want to see somebody being an actual head ruler. The Ska are easy to accept that because it's for them it's not entirely different from where they were before with the Lord Ruler. But Elend basically takes all of those political theory and all that knowledge that he had taken from reading and was able to actually establish this radical government that he had always planned to. The issue is theory versus practice are two very different things, as Elend soon finds out, because the government is on like a brink of disaster. Like one bad event could cause the entire government to collapse, like an army showing up to attack. Like I said, it's been a year, and Elend is kind of the de facto leader of the crew, and all of the members of the crew are now have a kind of leadership position throughout the government or city, and they are doing their best. They got it all good, all fine and dandy, and then Elend's own father shows up with an army to attack Luthadel, with rumors that the atium storage, all of the atium that was mined for the Lord Ruler, has to be in the city because that's where it was delivered, and very little of what was mined was actually given out to the nobles as payment for whatever. So this stash of atium has to be somewhere, and the only real logical place is Luthadel. So Straff shows up with his army, and then, as if one army was not enough, yet another army shows up to siege the city. And then, a little bit later, yet a third army shows up. So now, this very tenuous situation that they find themselves in the city, trying to hold everything together, they now have to figure out how to survive not one, not two, but 3 armies besieging their city, and how to maneuver and figure out how to survive there. Much less, one of these armies is a Koloss army. They're like Hulk zombies. It's probably the best way of doing that. where they're really chill, really cool, but then they get into this blood fury and they are impossible. They're the most destructive creatures in all of Scadrial. The first book, The Final Empire, dealt a lot with like court politics and how to like maneuver parties and like kind of like house warfare. This is much more of like full on war and politics and how to negotiate, maneuver, all of that type of implementation type political theory. All right, so let's run through some characters real quick. Vin is struggling to fill Kelsier's shoes as the Mistborn of the crew, the person that's actually protecting the crew, making sure everybody stays safe, much less trying to protect the entire city. And different nobles have been sending assassins to try to eliminate Elend, and she's been having to fight them off from time to time. There's been a few here and there. And there is actually one other Mistborn that just kind of like hangs back and watches. And whenever she tries to approach, they basically kind of do this chase game where the Watcher's always running away and Vin's chasing him. And so that makes her nervous, much less all the other assassins and whatnot. But on top of that, she does not feel like she's a noblewoman like she was pretending to be in the first book. Although she's in a relationship with the king, she feels like that's a pretend or a false part of her that fulfilled the role, and that's not actually her true self. As well as she can't go back to just being like a regular Ska, because the Ska people now revere her as a religious figure, calling her the heir to the survivor being Kelsier, and an entire church called the Church of the Survivor being named after him and people worshiping him. And now she's like the heir to him, the new religious person. And so this entire book, she just struggles with her own identity. Who is she? Where's her place? What is her role to play in this? And it was interesting and fun to follow that along, to figure out, in your own head as the reader, being like, of course, this is what you do. Who cares? You be with Ellen, you be a Mistborn, and if you want to, you can be the heir or not. But that's all, it's all your choice. Just make the choice and live by it. I mean, in real world, that's not how people work. But in a book, of course, that's how you make the decisions for your characters. Is just cut and dry, make it quick. Elend is the king, as I said, but his position is tenuous at best. He's not a very forceful leader. He's not a very inspiring leader, somebody that everybody gets behind. He's much more of a leader by de facto, and he makes his arguments and tries to convince people to join him or to agree with him. And because of that, he's viewed as weak. And so Tindwyl, a terrace woman, a keeper, takes it upon herself to teach him how to be a king and to appear a king and to inspire people to follow him. So she gives him the extreme makeover. She puts him in a suit that fits him very well, makes him wear white to show that he is above the ash and the filth of the world, different than the Lord Ruler. The Lord Ruler wore all black to show that he just didn't care, whereas now the opposite, two-part in that, where it shows I am nothing like the Lord Ruler, but I am also above the soot and the ash and whatever. Those have no power over me. And one funny part was he got to the end and they were going to cut his hair. His hair is all shaggy. Previously Ellen just, didn't care about his appearance. It made it a point of rebellion towards his father to be disheveled, clothes that are ill-fitting, shaggy hair, and just a complete defiance to his father. And so he does all those things, gets, the new suit, looking all nice, and they go to cut his hair and he's like, absolutely not. Until he sees himself and sees the difference that the suit and everything made and said, okay, cut the hair. And from that point on, the first time anybody from the crew, especially people that knew him, saw him, they were doing double takes left and right, like, oh, okay. The entire crew started calling him Your Majesty, treating him like the king that he was supposed to be. And it's interesting how those types of differences make yourself appear and act the way, not the way that you want to feel, but the way that people need to see you and feel you to be the leader they need. Let's talk about a couple of the other members of the crew real quick. Ham, he got did dirty. He's my favorite character in the first book. The thug of the group, the pewter arm, the big buff guy, the guy in charge of the physical fighting and whatnot. But the philosopher, the guy that's constantly trying to discuss philosophy and whatnot, he kind of took a back seat after the first quarter of the book. He was around, but not as much. And having read the third book, he takes an even smaller role in the next one. So, why you gotta do me like that, Brandon? Then, Breeze. Breeze is actually responsible for that second army showing up to Luthadel. And in a brilliant political move, convinces them that they need to come to Luthadel to try to get the Adium. But by doing so, having a similar size force as Straff Venture's army, they're now at a stalemate because neither army can attack the city without putting themselves into a weakened position for the other army to then attack them, and then thereby losing the city that they just attacked. Also, Luthadel is in a position of power now because they're able to potentially side with one army and choose who the ultimate victor will be, because with the two forces combined, they can overpower that other army. But when they show up, Breeze is on a horse riding as hard as possible for the city, with soldiers chasing him and arrows being shot at him, and the crew's on the city wall looking at him like, wonder what he did. Slept with the king's daughter. And it's a joke. Everybody starts laughing because Breeze is the soother of the group, the person that can manipulate feelings, but for whatever reason seems unable to get into any type of meaningful relationship with any women. And so Breeze comes back, and a short time later, the king's daughter also comes running towards the city, comes in, and just jumps and wraps her arms around Breeze, calls him Breezy, and they're all floored. They're like, hold up. You really slept with the king's daughter? And also notable, the king's daughter is like half his age, and so it's all just a big shock for the whole crew. And he's like, guys, stop. Breeze is trying his hardest to keep his self-image of being this manipulative bastard kind of character. Doxson was Kelsier's right-hand man, and in this new government, he kind of takes the role of this head bureaucrat, kind of the guy actually doing the work of running the country, making sure food supplies and trade routes and all these different infrastructure things that have to be done. He's kind of heading that, making sure everything's running smoothly, much like he did with the crew previously. And what's interesting is Doxson and Elend do not like each other. They cannot get along. They are amicable at best. They even get into it very briefly and then are able to kind of set it aside and kind of stick to the task at hand. But one of the best parts of this book was later on when Doxson's kind of has this heart-to-heart with Vin and reveals why he's being such a pain to Elend. And his reasonings are so good and add so much depth to his character that you can't help but feel for him. You understand his confliction with what he's struggling with. And there's little bits like that throughout this book for everybody. So these characters that you knew and loved from the previous book, you just continue to deepen that relationship with them. So, I got one thing to say about Straff Venture, Ellen's father. What a piece of crap. Yeah, that's it. That's all I got to say about him. You'll find out if you haven't read it already. Zane, Straff's Mistborn. What a character. He's kind of the driving force, kind of the main antagonist, maybe? Even though he's not like the leader, but he's kind of the main antagonist for Vin. He's actually the Watcher. He's the one going into the sparring matches with her and kind of plays this role of, hey, here's what could have happened if you and Kelsier, this connection that you had with Kelsier, if Kelsier wasn't so much older than you and was closer in age, here's where that could have gone. And Vin finds herself conflicted because Zane's a Mistborn and is constantly telling him, we're Mistborn, we're above all these, why are we still playing their games? You and I could leave and there's nothing they could do about it. We're the most powerful beings around right now. We should be leading them. We should be ruling them. We're above all these mundane things. And it's starting to really resonate with Vin because she's like, wait, maybe this is, what he's saying makes a lot of sense. I don't know what my place is here, but I could leave and, be free, go be with the Mist, be with Zane and whatnot. But Zane's also bat crap crazy. You find out he's got this like murderous voice in his head constantly. He'll go up to literally anybody and the voice in his head is just like, kill, kill, kill. So he knows he's crazy. And so in this relationship with Vin, they're starting to get closer. They're kind of frenemies-ish. It's kind of a weird thing where they're like sort of friendly with each other, but still on opposite sides of this conflict. And it's kind of a twist on the traditionally women getting with like a bad boy and being like, oh, well, I can fix him. It's now flipped on its end where there's a broken bad man going to a woman and saying, you're supposed to fix me. You're the one that can fix me. Make me better. And it's really interesting because he also knows he's crazy. And so it's just this dynamic where Vin's like feeling for him. He's like, I need to be able to help him. I want to help him, but I'm with Ellen. I love Ellen. I have this connection with him, but I love Ellen. Zane cannot wrap his head around having a relationship made out of love. He's not known love his entire life. Ellen isn't even aware of his existence because Zane was this like servant type role beggar that was like having to scratch and scrounge for every little bit just to survive. Until it was known that he was a Mistborn, Straff wanted nothing to do with him. He did not care. As soon as he became useful, Straff's like, come here. And that's where their relationship is built on. Nothing but abuse. And even after that, still abuse. Still dysfunctional as hell. But he's such a very conflicted, deep character. And it's amazing to watch his progression throughout this book. So, one criticism about this book that I had, it had a very middle book syndrome feel to it, where the first book you've got this thieving crew that's trying to kill the Lord Ruler and overthrow the government. They succeed. Then you got this middle book where they're now having to deal with the consequences of that, with seizing power and now having to defend said power. All fine and good. But having read the third book, it does not fit as much as I feel like it does. It feels like it's like one book, then almost like a 2-part series in these last 2 books. And so that's almost what it feels like, or like the first half of a season of a TV show, where they go up to the mid-season finale, but then you got to come back and it's actually the finale, the things that are actually going on there. And it almost had these 2 different storylines going on, where you have the siege story and the politics there, but then you also have this hero of ages, well of Ascension type story going on where they're, they don't fit together as well as I would think. They don't have a lot of crossover as far as storyline. It's not like, oh, the armies are besieging the city because they want access to the Well of Ascension. It's almost like the separate thing going on, and so they just don't. My feeling was those two things did not fit together well. But I thoroughly enjoyed both parts, and the end of this book was so action-packed. I think I read the last half of this book in like 2 days. Like, just flew through it once I hit that stride and, all the action started going on. And let me just say, Mistborn Vin really letting loose and showing her Mistborn powers. Holy crap, like that's some crazy stuff. Overall, I really enjoyed the book. How did you like it? Let me know down below. Overall, I really enjoyed the book. I want to know your thoughts though. Comment down below. How did you like the book? Who was your favorite character? What's your favorite parts? Just let me know what you think. That's all I got for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'm JJ the Bearded Bookworm, and we will see you tomorrow.